Welcome, Carole Montgomery. Thank you so much for reaching out to me and for the opportunity that we are now here in conversation today on Shift Happens. And before we start and you share about your life and your shift and shifts, I
Mhm.
wanted to ask you a few questions.
Sure.
Dogs or cats?
Can I say both?
Sure.
Yeah, both. Both.
Okay. Okay. Still or sparkling?
Still, I'm a New Yorker. I mean, the pipes in New York water is the best. So still,
Apples or oranges?
apples.
What is your current state of mind?
Uh, my face is showing you. My current state of mind right at this moment is frustrated.
Okay, good. I mean, we will not dig into that, but yeah. When was the last time you surprised yourself in a good way?
Oh, wow. Wow. When was the last time um I can't remember it. I can't remember. I think anytime that I do something that is not what I usually do, like in other words, I'm so used to doing things very consistently. So when I step out of my, excuse me, when I step out of my comfort zone
Mm-hmm.
and it turns out to be an okay thing, that's when I'm
Mm-hmm.
surprised because I'm like, why
Mm-hmm.
didn't you step out of the comfort zone?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that would absolutely be it. Stepping out of my comfort zone.
Mm-hmm. And last one, can you name something that made you smile this week?
My dog. My dog. My dog. We She's a very timid little girl. And because we got her, she was abandoned. So we have this footrest and she jumped from the footrest onto the bed like it was only like this small, not that, but it was a big deal. Like we were like, ah, we were so happy for her because she conquered her fear and she jumped.
She stepped
That
also out of her comfort zone. Yeah.
She did step out of
Yeah.
her comfort zone. Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Good. So you are a stand-up comedy all-star,
Oh, thank
and
you.
you shared with me that you had this very rich career. Started out in New York City, then moved over to the West Coast, had a number of years performing in Las Vegas,
Yeah.
and then you said at around age 50 or end 40s, it was almost like an invisible stop sign was
Mhm.
there, and suddenly aging became a topic.
Yep.
And I wanted to ask you, how you remember it, how you realize that, and then how you moved out of it.
Um, it's so interesting. Um, I feel like I've become this a big spokesperson for pro aging,
Hmm.
obviously, because I'm 67 now. But
Hmm.
when it started to happen is I was a road comic. I was making a very good living on the road as a comedian, all the time. And then I moved to Las Vegas, and then when I came back to New York after we were in Las Vegas, I realized that I didn't I never I realized I was older. I mean, I never think of myself as older. I'm just who I am. And I saw that my opportunities were just starting to dwindle. And I wasn't on the road as much. And plus the internet had started to take off and social media started to take off. And they wanted the younger, cuter, hotter, whatever. So it was around 50. I thought, well, I want to stay in my business.
Hmm.
I want to continue to do comedy. So to supplement doing that, I started to direct. I started to develop solo shows. I started acting a little bit. I started teaching, and that's all because I was being pushed. I was being pushed aside, like, oh, she doesn't have anything. When I was 59, um, uh, uh, I really realized, I was like, okay, we have to figure out what we're going to do with the rest of our lives. And I was doing a podcast with a bunch of other female comics, and they were also older. And we were doing stories about being on the road and just what it's like to be a woman in comedy.
Hmm.
And when I was coming home, I called my husband. I said, I think I have an idea.
Hmm.
And a show about, a comedy show with all female comics over the age of 50. It was the first time in my life my husband actually went, that's a good idea. No, because in show business, you always have ideas that you're always coming up with what's going to be the thing. And that turned into the thing that basically changed my life. That turned
Hmm.
into Funny Women of a Certain Age. And of course now that's basically what I do. I rarely go out and perform by myself. I'm always out with a troupe of women.
And is it always the same constellation of women, or
Um,
is it, do you open this group up for other women to join or other stand-up comedians to join?
yes, we have a huge rotating cast. When I first came up with the idea, I remember thinking, okay, because I had just, I was over 50, and I knew a lot of women my age. And so there, I would say when I started making a list, I said I would say there were about 50 to 100, working women that I could use. And then I thought to myself, I wonder if I open up to 40, because 40 is really the cutoff point, I think,
Hmm.
in show business, where you no longer are the starlet, you are now the grandmother at 40 people at
No,
40.
no,
So, and then it became
it's
hundreds and
tragic.
hundreds of women.
Hmm.
So I have a core group that I use all the time, but for
Hmm.
the most part, I do try to put in new women all the time. So it is a rotating cast of women. The
Hmm.
women that were on the comedy specials that we filmed 3 comedy specials for Showtime. Uh, I pick and choose from, because usually the big theaters we do, they want the women from TV. So for the most part, I pick and choose some of those women. But the whole reason for the show was to give other women a step up and to be
Hmm.
seen, because as you get older, as every older woman will tell you, we are no longer in the sight line of anything anymore. Nobody looks
Yeah,
at us like,
no longer visible.
no longer visible. Like I say that I could walk past a construction site now naked, and nobody would say anything.
Oh, it's not funny. Yeah, I know.
But it's true. You know what I mean?
It's
It's like,
it's true.
and they don't. There's good things and bad things about being invisible. Like I could be an international spy now because
Mhm.
nobody knows where I am. I could be
Exactly.
a, I could be a pickpocket. That would be great. But you do realize that you're just like, wow, okay. So yeah, so it's a rotating cast, but I do try to put in new women all the time, because there's always new women trying to do stand up.
But since Showtime picked up your show and you had, TV specials and appeared there several times with your show, um, they must have seen the necessity, yeah, and the good side of it. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done it, right?
Well, that's so fascinating, because I remember when we in show, when you're shopping a show around it, you go to different networks and you sit there and you have a pitch, what they call a pitch meeting. And so I remember sitting there, and it was a young guy. He was years older than my son. My son's 33. And I remember sitting there with my partner, my producer partner, who's a guy, and he goes and does this. He did that. Like I just sat there and let him do his stuff, right? And when he was done doing his spiel, the young guy turned to me, goes, "I'd like to hear what Carole has to say." And that's when I knew I had it.
Hmm.
That's when I knew.
Hmm.
I said, "Okay, we've got this," because he
Hmm.
wanted to hear. He wanted to hear it directly from me, and I thought that was a
Great.
big. That was a big tell that
Hmm.
that that
Hmm.
that they wanted it. And he couldn't have been greater. He was our biggest supporter every time. He always. So you, I try not to say stuff like I was lucky, or
Hmm.
because I worked my butt off to get
Yeah.
to where the show is. But I do think we were there at the right time. We got the deal. I came up with the show in 2018, and in 2019 is when we got the deal with Showtime,
Hmm.
and then it aired. I think the following year. I want to say, I think it aired in 2020 was the first one, but that was all during Me Too, and there was a lot of pro women stuff happening.
Hmm.
So it
Hmm.
kind of we kind of like slipped
Hmm.
in a weird way because, and of course the first special was Showtime's highest rated comedy special they ever
Ah,
had. And then
amazing.
when I know, it was like so exciting. I was like, oh, you mean I was right? People want to see old women. And I was right, because after that was Schitt's Creek was on the air and Hacks was on the air. That's all.
Hmm.
I'm not saying I personally did that, but I move, at least I moved what's the word? I moved it. I moved it. I whatever that is. I moved the
Yeah.
line to, they're looking at older women now, and now
Yeah.
there's tons
Yeah.
of stuff for older women. So I did have something to do with that, and that's great. That's a great feeling to have.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, it's really fantastic. And the content of your show is is a lot of everyday topics that concern women of a certain age, or yeah, where do you where do you get your input and your jokes?
Are you talking about me or the show
Yeah,
itself?
the show and then also you personally.
Well, one of the things when we were looking for the women that were going to be in the specials is, yes, it's about women of a certain age, but you don't have to do that. One of the things I'm proudest at is that if when you look at, we had we had six girls on each show, including me. So we had 15 for all three shows. We had 15 female comics plus myself. And if you look at any one of those women, they all nobody's talking about the same stuff. They're talking about their experiences from their lives. Because one of
Hmm.
the things I heard my entire career was, we don't want to put two women on a show because they're going to talk about the same thing. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like you could have a young guy talk about, smoking pot in his mother's basement, and you know all that type of crap. But you women are so diverse, and
Hmm.
so I love the fact that some touched on on being women of certain age, some touched on, their parents, because everyone forgets that when you become this age, if you're lucky to have your parents, then you're probably their caregivers. So there
Hmm.
were comics that talked about that. And for me, my personal way that I write is, I always say that when I started out, I was young and I was single. I was looking to date. So I talked about dating. I met my husband. He was my boyfriend then. So I talked about my boyfriend. And then we got married. Then I talked about that. Then I had a son. Then I talked about that. And now it's really basically about trying to navigate this world as a 67-year-old woman. I still have the material about my family, and I have stuff about my dog now. But
Hmm.
I've always been a comic that talks about, uh, from the heart. What my heroes are. My biggest hero is Richard Pryor, and that's all he did was
Hmm.
talk about his life. And so
Hmm.
it depends. At some point, if my son ever has grandchildren, I'm not I'm not holding my breath. But if I have grandchildren, I'll talk about them. But
Hmm.
that's it's to me that's much more interesting than just
Yeah.
jokes.
No, it's the authenticity also, right? I mean, it's very personal and yet it's universal, and we all
Correct.
find ourselves in it. Yes. Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And your audiences are mostly women, or is it mixed, or how would you describe
Um,
that?
it's interesting because it is a female oriented show.
Yeah.
People always think, oh, is it only for women? I'm like, no, bring the men. We want them to hear.
Hmm.
We were just in Sellersville, Pennsylvania this past weekend, and the whole front row were women with their husbands or boyfriends or whatever. And it was so much fun to watch women just doing this. She's talking about you. She's talking about you,
Hmm.
because you want the men there. And it's a mixed crowd. I mean, my favorite audience, obviously, audiences are people in their 50s and up. just because we can really relate. But when we taped the specials, all three specials, two were taped at the Bell House in Brooklyn, and the other one was taped at the Irvine Improv in Irvine, California.
Hmm.
I would say at least a third of the audience were kids in their 20s.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm not afraid of playing to young people because they look at me like I'm Yoda.
Hmm.
You know, they literally stand, they no, but they do. They look at me like this. Tell us what should we learn? So I don't like I know some women that don't like to work for younger crowds because like what am I going to talk about? I said I will always find something that
Hmm.
somebody can
To
relate to. What
connect.
I Yeah, the one thing I don't like, and I don't do this anymore, but sometimes in New York City, the comedy clubs have a late show, like a midnight show, and
Hmm.
I'm way past midnight.
Yeah.
I've done those, and I'm like, they're all drunk, they're young kids. I can still connect with them, but I'm tired. I don't want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Is it hard to make you laugh?
No, I love to laugh. Even though I'm a comedian and my job is to make other people laugh, I love I love to laugh. I still watch sitcoms. I still watch we just went to see The Naked Gun. It was great. My son said, "Mom, there's jokes in it. You're going to really like it." I mean, I think
Hmm.
laughter is the greatest thing you can do,
Hmm.
especially in bad times.
Hmm. Hmm.
Or if you're going through something. So many people, I'm so lucky. People come up to me after a show and they go, I really needed this tonight. I had such a horrible day, or they lost a loved one, or, or they lost their job and they're like, we just wanted to go away. And so I still laugh. I actually went to see a female comic and most comics will say to you, Carole, you went to see somebody? Because,
Hmm.
we see comedians all the time. But there's a young lady from Britain named Sarah Millican,
Hmm.
and I had seen a video of her and I fell in love with her. She's a little she's of course she's British, so she's naughty, in a little blue. And I always say that if I had had a daughter, it would be Sarah Millican, because we
Okay.
have that same type of, I'm from Brooklyn. I'm a little more out there when it comes to being, edgy.
Hmm.
But I went and bought a ticket to see her here in New York City. I went by myself. I did, and everyone was like, "Really?" I said, "I had the best time. I was laughing." It's just because you do that for a living doesn't mean you can't. I mean, I can't imagine if I was if there might be comedians that never laugh, which is sad, I think,
Hmm.
because laughter is
Hmm.
so much fun.
Hmm. Actually, in Germany, where I'm from, we we also have comedians,
Of course you do.
and um, and some came out in recent years with and shared that they actually really struggled with depression and
Mhm.
and were extremely sensitive, to what is going on, and there was a time where they had to then, take a break from the stage to recover, but that was really moving, and
Mhm.
of course there was a then a stage where they also made fun about it, but also just the fact that there are these, it's very complex, especially to be a comedian, stand-up comedian. It's very complex. It's the
Yes.
authenticity, it what comes from the heart, and to balance this all, it's a lot.
Well, I mean, you're talking about depression and all that stuff. I would say that, I'm not a statistician. I'm a statistician, but I would say probably half of comedians you suffer depression or some kind of mental health. You don't stand up in front of thousands of people and tell jokes if you're not a little,
Yeah,
something's
yeah.
not a little,
Mm.
but in my case, like, people always ask me, like, I've been doing stand-up comedy for over 40 years. Like, it's all I know. Like, it's my job. And so I guess it is therapy for me, because I've gone on stage after horrible, after deaths of loved ones
Mhm.
and my parents and family, and you just go up there because that's the only place that I feel safe that I
Mhm.
know that I can go out and be as outrageous as I want to be, get the laughter. It really is when you're doing when you're performing and you're doing like what in the industry call it killing. You know, when it's just everything. There is a high when you get
Hmm.
off stage that
Hmm.
there's nothing better. There's no
Hmm.
drugs, there's no alcohol, there is nothing better. But then you'll do something like that and you'll have this great set, and then you go back to your hotel room and you're by yourself and you're playing on your phone, and like it's such a dichotomy of what we
Hmm.
go through. So yeah, I'm sure that there's so many comedians
Hmm.
I that have some kind of, you know, mental health issue. You know,
Hmm.
I really try to stay present in my life. So,
Hmm.
but you know, I mean, I'm sure that in 40 years I've been depressed.
Hmm. Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
you know, it's part of life. It has nothing to do with being in show business. It's just
Yeah,
part of
yeah,
our
yeah.
life.
Part of life,
To
yeah.
be an empath, I'm an empath.
Hmm.
I feel I feel when I
Hmm.
see people, when, you
Hmm.
know, I can't not feel. So with
Hmm.
everything that's happening in the world right now, it's like, you know, you just, where do you go and what do you do? Oh, I know. I'll write some jokes. I'll go on stage. That's,
Hmm.
like I said,
That's
that's
your
my
safe
safe.
space. Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. Did you grow up with a lot of laughter?
Yes, my dad. My dad wanted to be a comedian,
Hmm.
and he was a bartender. He was a high school teacher, public school teacher, and then in the summertime when he had the summers off, he bartended up in the Catskills in the Borscht Belt.
Hmm.
So as a young child, I'd spend the afternoons with my dad, and he'd be setting the bar up. And you know, Rodney Dangerfield at the time, who was Jack Roy, he wasn't Rodney Dangerfield then. He would come in, have a drink with my dad, talk about the, you know. So I was around comedians my whole life. So years later, it didn't even dawn on me. I was already knee deep in this career, and I looked at my father and I went, "You're the reason I became a comedian." And he just started laughing.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah.
I've been around it the whole time. He was the one that turned me on to the Marx Brothers when I was a little girl, and he always was making jokes and everything. And I think he really did want to be a comedian, but you know, it was a different time back then. It was, you know,
Hmm.
I was born in '58, so he had just come back from the Korean War. So you know, you didn't go and do something like that. He went and got a job as a teacher, and you know, we raised a family with my mom.
Hmm. Um, Men of a certain age, is it easier for them, or do they face kind of the same hesitation to be
um,
produced and put on stage?
well, men have, like I always joke about, because male comics have come in, why aren't you doing men of a certain age? And I'm like, yeah, Jim Gaffigan doesn't need my help. You know, Bill
Yeah.
Burr doesn't need my help. You know, Mark Maron doesn't need my help. Women need help. Um, the thing is that like I said, it's a male dominated business.
Hmm.
So the fact that now, and this makes me really happy, there's a lot of young, vibrant, beautiful women doing stand up, and they're getting successful. So I think that's wonderful. But is it easier for men, older men? Absolutely.
Hmm.
Absolutely. I will say that I think men do experience ageism too, but like I always say, that I say on stage, I said men will start to experience ageism around late 60s, early 70s.
Hmm.
Women start experiencing ageism around age 15. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
they don't have to
Hmm.
worry about how they look on stage. Or you know, for years I was told, because I am what, you know, what I'm considered a blue comic, even though compared to the children who are up now, I'm really very mild. But back in the day, I was, oh, she's dirty, oh, she's this, oh, she's that. And then I'd see a guy doing pretty much the same kind of material, and they were like, he's brilliant. And I'm,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So it's,
yeah.
so there's
Double standards.
definitely, yes,
Mm.
there's definitely still a double standard.
Hmm. Hmm. So, what do you do in to calm down?
That's a good question. Um, what do I do to calm down? I'm like very simple. I love spending. I love my. I'm crazy about my dog. I
Mhm.
I had dogs when we lived in Vegas. When we moved to New York originally, my mother-in-law was still alive and she was allergic, so we couldn't have dogs. But then towards the end of her life, I convinced her. I said, "Let's foster a dog.
Mhm.
Let's just see if we can." And we ended up fostering this dog. We'll have her 2 years in September. And my mother-in-law fell in love with her, and she wasn't allergic to her. So when I'm really upset, and I think animals in general,
Mhm.
they sense
Oh yeah.
when you're
Oh
wound
yeah.
up or everything because they
Mhm.
kind of run. So for stuff like that, if I'm really upset, I jump into bed with my dog. But for every day, I love watching old television. I love watching comedy. I when During the pandemic, my husband and I went through the entire series of Mary Tyler Moore. We went
Mhm.
through the entire series of the Bob Newhart show. I sit around and I read. I'd like to drink all the time, but I'm 67 and the doctor's like, no more drinking. It's so I go out to
Mhm.
dinner. You try I live right by Central Park, so
Mhm.
you could sometimes I just go out and walk in the park, and that's amazing because I have this giant park right next to me. So
Mhm.
you know, I I wish I could say that I do a ton of stuff, but for me, it's very simple: dog, reading, park.
And what's next now for the funny women of a certain age?
Well, we're going, it's so interesting. In the summertime, because I don't know when this will air, but in the summertime, which we are talking right now, it's always I've been doing stand up over 40 years, and every summer this happens, and I look at my husband, I'm like, I have no work. He goes, you never have work in June and July. It's the you if you ask any comedian there, it's bizarre,
Mhm.
unless of course they're superstars and then they're working. So I can already see a difference, right now that things are starting to shift again. Um, yeah, I'm getting more calls. We're doing this. So we already have dates through May of 26. We're still trying
Fantastic.
to, yeah, I'm very excited about that. And you can check all of that stuff on our website.
Mhm.
Um, uh, we're still trying to sell the series. Like the series isn't over.
Yeah.
Showtime does it right now. It was bought by Paramount Plus. They're no longer doing comedy specials in general, not just
Mhm.
mine, in general. So we want to pick it up and uh, bring it to another network where it's more of a weekly thing, where we do like a half hour. There was a show called Evening at the Improv years ago. It was basically the owner of the Improv, Bud Friedman, and then he'd bring in three comics, and that's really why I'm trying to shift again and change
Mhm.
the show into me as the host, three up and coming older female comics. So we're still trying to change. We're trying to sell that. We re-released the specials on Comedy Dynamics, so now they're streaming everywhere.
Oh,
So that's
fantastic.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because we're older, but all this internet stuff, like you have to have, you have to have content and you have to have reels, and so we've been lucky the last few times we've been doing reels through Comedy Dynamics. One of the girls got over 22 million views, and I was like, "Is that good?" And they're like, "Oh, no, no, that's really good." I don't know what the kids are doing. It's just
Yeah.
but we've got an interest now on the internet again.
Mhm.
So
Great.
yeah. So
Mhm.
so so I'm going to continue to do this. This is become this is my baby. This is
Mhm.
I really I love going on shows like this and discussing this with other
Mhm.
people, and the whole thing about pro aging, and just because you turn an age doesn't mean you can't do something.
Absolutely, absolutely. And last, no, this the season before last, I talked to a wonderful woman who, since then, unfortunately, sadly, has passed.
Oh,
Dale
sorry.
Haddon. She was in her 70s when she passed last December. But She was amazing, and she worked as a model, also a little bit as an actress. But when she was told also with 36 that, this is it, like
Yep.
basic, not only that she can't work anymore, but that her life is over, she
Right.
really was like, And
Uh-huh.
she has had contracts with all the big companies and was still working, in her 70s and
Right.
was in her best form ever. And she was advocating and just sharing, helping and supporting women. And it's a tough job. It's hard, and ageism is everywhere. Ageism is also in the family. And I just turned 58, and actually, I never thought about age until something happened recently to me, and it's really, almost it's an audacity, yeah. I mean, like
Right.
what? Like
You know,
what?
I see it sometimes, especially in my field, because there's so many young kids. And when I walk in, they kind of look like they roll their eyes. And then I go on stage, and then everyone wants to talk to me because they're like, oh. But it is interesting that you exactly 58 is young. 67 is young. Just because I'm like I'm trying to show people that once you become a senior citizen, that you're not frail and feeble. The catchphrase to the show is, I'm incontinent, not incompetent.
Yes. Yeah,
you, you
exactly.
know there have
Exactly.
been there have been people in who are in their hundreds who've come to my shows.
Hmm.
They come
Hmm.
out, and people, and I apologize because I go, I'm sorry, it's an 8 o'clock show. Do you know what I mean? Because I try to do early shows now anyway, just because for me.
Hmm.
But just this whole thing about that the youth is the future of America, or of America, of the world, the youth, and it's like, they're not.
Well, I mean, they, of course, they are the future. However, the near future is also because of this whole longevity,
Mhm.
which it's not a trend. I mean, it will really alter our lives, and it will alter the next generation's lives.
Right,
We will
right,
be coming older, and also so many societies and countries have a society, or are just old. It's older.
right,
It's not enough kids are being born, not enough
right.
young people are in the workforce. So, we all need to stay in the workforce anyway, and that's a good thing, yeah. And
Yeah,
I'm really happy that the narrative is changing around this, and I think, like, this generation, our generation, is in the midst of it, but we have also the opportunity to pave the pave the way forward for the younger ones, yeah. And
right.
I think that's, really great. I mean, there's so many discussions on longevity and on the future of work,
Right.
and to tap into the knowledge, right, of people that have been in the workforce for 30, 40 years.
Well, I hope that people always ask me, I hope that I'm still performing when I'm 100. I mean, I want to be like what George Burns did. He didn't make it. He was 99, but you want to. I mean, Mel Brooks is, I want to say he's like 95 or 96, and we saw him a couple of years ago. They re-released Blazing Saddles, and then he came out and was interviewed, and was interesting. You could tell, he kind of shuffled on because he's, in his 90s. But as soon as he started to talk about his work,
Hmm.
he was
Lit
a
up.
Mel new. Yeah.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it doesn't mean, I don't know why ageism exists. I don't know if it's because they're afraid of that they're dying, or that their bodies are giving way, or I'm not really, I still try to talk about that.
Hmm.
Like I have a line in my show where I go, when a young girl is rude to me because of my age, I just look at her and go, I don't bleed monthly anymore. I win.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like
Yes.
just stuff that
Mm.
just the
Yeah.
stuff that young women have to
Yeah.
go through
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
day. I don't
Mm.
have to do anymore.
Mm.
That's great.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
with men, the whole macho and this and how great is it to not to be a guy and just not care about that stuff anymore? But I still, someday maybe I'll figure it out, but I would love to know why people are so afraid of getting old. I would love to,
I I think it has to do with in the end with the fear of death, with the fear of, that one can have an end.
yeah.
And I think in our Western society, we we are not including death into life. It's
Hmm.
completely separated. We include
Yes.
birth into life, but death is, not really part of the whole spiel.
Right.
And
Right.
I think that's a big problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we
But
see it every year, yeah. I mean, the
right.
change of the seasons and all of that. But we've all been kind of socialized to be productive and, to be young. And if we're not young, then we need to look young and all of that. Even though I think this is like the narrative is changing, and thanks to also, women and humans like you,
Yep.
it's, we are I feel like we're on a good trajectory.
Oh, I do too. I
Yeah.
think because I think women are, we my generation, I was the generation that you grew up with the we can do anything, like we were the 70s is when I grew up, and that was all of women's lib. And so I did not I had no when I had my son, I took him on the road with me. I had a brand new 6-week old baby, and I'm schlepping him through airports to get to a gig in Pittsburgh. And I
Mhm.
didn't think anything of it. And so when I see women that go, well, I don't know, I'm afraid I shouldn't do that, I'm like, do it. Just go out and whatever it is you want to do, go out and do it, because the worst thing can happen is that you can fail. And that's another thing. Like I the whole thing about failing is good. Yeah,
Mhm.
if you
Mhm.
can't, we live it, in I was part of that with as a mother, the whole let's give everybody a trophy.
Mhm.
Ooh, and it's like, no,
Mhm.
no, 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 no.
Mhm.
Some of you sucked, so you should not have but so it's this whole thing of failure is looked upon like, oh my God, saying no. Like I have I taught one of the things I'm proudest about with my son is that I said always ask if you need something from, like, if you want, if you have, you need somebody, or you have a favor to ask of someone, ask them. If they say no, it's nothing personal.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
nothing personal.
Mhm.
They're
Yeah.
busy, they can't do anything. It's
Mhm.
never, oh, I hate you, why did you ask me that? It's like, oh, I can't. And I
Mhm.
learned that from a friend of mine who was a very busy producer, and I was doing my solo show at the time. I was writing, and I said, I could really use some help on like what you think, just some ideas. And he goes, Carole, I can't. I love you. I just can't. I'm just so busy. And I went, okay. And we went off, and went out. So, don't be afraid of the word no. Don't be afraid of failure,
Mhm.
and don't be afraid of getting old.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. No, I think it's fun, and it's also a blessing, yeah. I mean, I lost friends already, and so I'm really really grateful as
Right.
well.
I mean,
Mm.
it's, getting older is better than the alternative.
Hmm.
So,
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. This or better. Yes.
yes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Carol, this has been great. Thank you so
Oh, thank
much.
you. Oh, I love this. This was so much fun.
Hmm.
Thank you.
Hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and I will direct everyone to your website to find out the dates for your
Oh,
for your
yes.
fall shows and the performances into 26.
Yes. And we do have a monthly residency here in New York City at
Hmm.
the Comedy Village on West 44th Street. So it's also on the website, Funny Women of a Certain Age. But everyone, come on down. Come say hi. Say you
Yeah.
heard me on the podcast.
Yeah. All right. Well, have a wonderful rest of your day, and it's been
Thank you, Claudia.
really
It was
fantastic
wonderful.
to speak to you.
I had a blast. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.